Welcome to the Sargassum Podcast, where we learn about the latest ideas and concepts about sargassum. This podcast is funded by the Resilience, Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity Program, RESMBIT. It's financed under the 11th European Development Fund, EDF, Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Regional Program. RESMBIT is being implemented by expertise grants, with primary stakeholders being the 12 Caribbean overseas countries. Let's get ready to learn together.
Hello, everyone, to the new podcast episode. We have interesting guests today with us. But first of all, I want to know how is Jenna? How are you, Jenna?
I'm doing well, Evelyn. Thanks for asking. I'm looking for funding for my PhD program furiously every day and getting excited to have a little break this summer before I start school in September. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Also, I am very relaxed nowadays, and well, it's very early in the morning for me also today, so I am just waking up with this interview and to learn more with our guest. And talking about our guest, I want to introduce to you Yasa. Yasa is the project manager for the Sustainable Sargassum Management in Anguilla, British Virgin Islands and Montserrat project, which is funded by the UK government through Darwin Plus Overseas Territories Environment and Climate Fund under the Darwin Initiative. The project is led by the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, CANARI, in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources, Anguilla, Ministry of Natural Resources, Labour and Immigration, British Virgin Islands, Department of Environment, Monserrat, Centre for Resource Management and Environmental Studies of the University of the West Indies, UWI, CERMES, and Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Commissions. From September 2022 to February 2023, a multidisciplinary team of stakeholders in Montserrat, comprised of government and civil society representatives, was trained in the use of unmanned aerial systems, drones, for participate in monitoring and management of sargassum.
We also have with us Mrs. Lavern Ryan, who's passionate about the use and application of Geographic Information Systems, GIS. She's been working in the field of GIS for almost 20 years. She has a Master of Science degree in GIS from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, and also a second Master of Science in Spatial Planning from the University of Dundee in Scotland. Lavern continues to advance the application of GIS on Montserrat by making significant contributions in the areas of census mapping, disaster response and mitigation, environmental management, land management, and marine spatial planning, just to name a few. Lavern is a UAV expert and certified drone pilot. Given her keen interest in disaster response, Lavern also volunteers for Map Action, a UK-based humanitarian mapping charity group. Mrs. Ryan founded her company LRR Geospatial Consultancy with the aspiration of sharing the benefits of GIS to a wider audience. Welcome, both of you, to the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So the first question we always ask all of our guests, and I would like an answer from both of you, please, is what is sargassum to you?
Okay,
Okay,
so
I'll
maybe
go
I can go
first.
first. Okay. Well, for
Okay.
me, okay, you go, Lavern. Go ahead.
Thanks, Yasa. Okay, so actually, sargassum is quite an inconvenience. It is a floating seaweed, and it is unsightly. It really does mess up the landscape, in my opinion, and nobody wants to get close to it. So the best the best methods that we can find to actually improve the management of sargassum. I'm ready and willing to help to participate in that. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was so adamant in joining this project in sargassum monitoring.
Yeah, well, for me, as a coastal dweller, I can identify with Lavern in terms of the ways in which sargassum can be a nuisance. But I see sargassum as both an opportunity and a threat. And that's the framing that we want to have. We want stakeholders to start to adopt in this project. Although sargassum can cause severe disruptions, it can also solve a lot of global and local problems and generate new livelihoods and economic benefits. So I see it as an opportunity for us to do things differently.
Yes, it's different kind of views about sarcasm, and we want to know how is people in Montserrat affected by sarcasm.
Okay, so in Monserrat, thankfully, so far, the beaches that have been inundated with sargassum are on the Atlantic coast, and that's where most of the rougher seas are. And most persons do not use the beach in those areas. So one such beach is Margarita Bay. It is an environment for bird watching, and there's a little area for wetlands. But in terms of people, not many people utilize that area. Some fishermen go there at times to do ad hoc fishing, but it's not a common use beach. So most people have not been significantly affected by sargassum. However, this March, we noticed a few bits of sargassum washing up on our popular beaches on the western coast, so the Caribbean seaside. And there were quite a few people asking, what is that? Um, why is it coming in? But it wasn't significant enough to disrupt anything. So we have been noting that there is a change in the climate and different things are happening. So people are becoming more aware of sargassum.
And how do you handle the sargassum in Montserrat? So I know it sounds like fisheries isn't really too affected, probably tourism isn't too affected, and it sounds also like maybe there aren't really too many people living on that side even of the island. So how have you guys been handling it there?
So far we haven't done anything. So it washes in, it dries up, and some is washed back out. We haven't done any sort of removal yet because the beach hasn't affected anyone in particular. And the beaches that were affected on the eastern side, the Caribbean seaside, in a matter of days, the sargassum disappeared. So that was good, but we know that the projections are that there is more coming. So in the future, we hope that there is a more conscious effort in terms of how it's being handled.
Okay. Yes.
And Yasa, just going to add something. Sorry. Yasa, you're on Nevis
Mhm.
right now, actually. Are they having any kind of sargassum problem there that you've noticed while you've been there, or on St. Kitts?
Well, I haven't been to the beaches in St. Kitts, but on the beaches in Montserrat, I have noticed sargassum. I went to a beach on Monday evening, and there were piles of sargassum. Actually, when I was going down to the beach, I thought it was a vehicle. From the distance, I thought it was a vehicle, but it was a huge mound. And apparently, they've been removing sargassum from that beach for the last couple months or so. So it's an issue
On
here.
Nevis. Okay.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the Sustainable Sargassum Management Project as a whole and the implementation of the sargassum management plans developed under the project, please?
Sure, sure. So, as you said in the introduction, it's a 3-year project that's funded by the UK government through the Darwin Plus Overseas Territories Environment and Climate Fund under the Darwin Initiative. And we have partners in each of the three participating territories. In Montserrat, our partner is the Department of Environment. The aim of the project is to enhance knowledge, institutional frameworks, experience, and commitment of coastal and marine resource managers and users in each of the territories so that they'll be able to manage the ecological and socioeconomic impacts from sargassum influxes. The project has three components. Component one looks at strengthening the evidence base for decision making. And under this component, we conducted scoping studies to get an idea of how sargassum is affecting the communities in the territory. We also conducted this training in drone monitoring, as Lavern mentioned, and the aim was to be able to integrate this drone data into GIS and other relevant databases to enable data analysis and management. And we also developed participatory research and monitoring frameworks, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second. Under component two, we are mobilizing knowledge for action. So we conducted a CAP survey, a knowledge, attitudes, and practice survey, where we try to understand, how people are thinking about sargassum, how they're being affected by it, and what are they doing to respond. In response to the results of this survey, we developed a communication and engagement strategy, and we're developing knowledge projects that would then be disseminated in Monserrat and in the other OTs to raise awareness. We will also be working with partners in each territory to conduct awareness raising activities and trainings. Under the last component, component three, what we're doing is trying to improve sargassum management through the development of sargassum management plans. That was what we originally called them, but what we realized is that it's very difficult to plan, to create concrete plans for something that's constantly changing, that there's a lot of uncertainty about, and where there's a lot of complexity. So what we developed was sargassum adaptive management strategies. And I will go into a bit of this. And resulting from those strategies, we developed the strategy. We will then be conducting training of trainers workshops on best practices for sargassum management. And these workshops are coming up in April and May of this year. So just around the corner in a few weeks. So
I wanted to ask something about the end of the thing you said. These strategies of the management of sargassum, can you mention one strategy that you have in this plan?
Okay, so the sargassum adaptive management strategy, as I mentioned, sargassum management takes place in the context of uncertainty. We don't know a lot about when the influxes will take place. Yes, we have forecasts, but we don't know exactly what location, how much is going to be beached, the composition of the sargassum that will arrive, the impacts, the responses. So when you have a situation like this where there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty, you can either decide to spend a lot of time trying to improve your forecasts or your predictions, or you can be tempted to act very quickly and to take actions which might actually be maladaptive. So what SAM's put a lot of emphasis on is a participatory approach, a multi-level approach that emphasizes learning by doing. So we're taking action, but we're using this adaptive management cycle where we are assessing what the situation is, we're designing an approach, and then we're implementing and monitoring as we go along and evaluating and making adjustments. So we look at things such as how do we prioritize which areas we're going to make investments in terms of cleaning up, because we don't have a lot of funding, so governments don't have an infinite amount of money. So how do we make allocations? Issues of governance, who has authority to make different decisions? The institutional arrangements for effective coordination is also discussed. what are the practical actions and operations for the different phases? At the pre-influx phase, what do you do? At the influx phase, at the post-influx phase? So the SAMS really provides that strategic framework that addresses these issues at a high level. But in terms of the actual in terms of the site level and sector level, that is where you can come up with more concrete plans. So what we're doing is providing the overarching framework in terms of you know the the authority, the institutional arrangements, money, actions and operations. And then we have a framework for how do you design the local level Sargassum management plans.
Okay. I
That was a
yes,
mouthful.
I am interested in this kind of management because I know that managing sargassum after the arrival to the coast has been very hard for many countries in the Caribbean, especially in Mexico. Well, I live here in Mexico,
Hmm.
so we have been dealing with this kind of problems of how to manage sargassum when the influxes are so big and we have tons and tons of
Mhm.
sargassum. So, the in your experience in all this process that you have been well working with sargassum, both of you, have you noticed like a way of like using sargassum afterwards, or there is a place, a special place they take sargassum when the amount is too much to deal with it, or no?
Okay, so one, you need to understand where is it possible for you to store the sargassum if you did move it. There has been research about the high heavy metal content in sargassum, so you don't want to put it in a location where it will decompose and then leach heavy metals into the soil and potentially the water table. So it's very important to, when you are planning, that you identify suitable locations where you're not going to cause more of a problem than you're solving. Um, Also, in some cases, like Lavern mentioned, there is a um, there's not a very high sensitivity to the impact of there's not a very high sensitivity, so it's okay for you to leave sargassum on the beach. If nobody is using the beaches in these areas, then it's better to just let the sargassum rot, or get washed back out to sea, rather than risking putting heavy equipment on the beach that could then compact the sand and affect the wildlife and ecosystems in the area. So you really need to make a judgment as to whether or not it makes sense to intervene. Um,
Thank you.
I don't know what Laverne thinks about this.
I completely agree with you. One thing that we noticed when we did our drone monitoring survey was that after we created the base map, so we created the first base map in October last year, there was nothing on the beach. Absolutely nothing. The beach was pristine. So we're like, okay, we did the base map. And then our trainer came, was like, okay, you got to go do another one. So we did another one in February. And when we got to the beach again in February, it was totally opposite. I myself was shocked because the beach was inundated with sargassum, like full, like from the coast, from the ridge to the next ridge. It was full of sargassum. So, okay, we were excited to actually carry out the entire monitoring protocol. We measured the sargassum on the beach, we laid out transects, and then we incorporated that back into the mapping. But one of the great things about the software we used, which was Drone Deploy, we're able to add annotation to that map. So in that map, we noticed, hey, there's no direct access to the beach for removal. There's no vehicular access. There was a little track that we walked down. So if there was a vehicle to come in to remove that sargassum, it's not possible. There's no vehicular access, and you have to basically cross a little swampy area to get to the beach. So noting that, it's not all the time you can actually remove the sargassum. So sometimes you just gotta leave it there, let it run its course, and hopefully nature will take care of itself. Yeah.
Thank you.
It sounds like you have some workshops.
I,
Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something else?
yeah, I think you had also asked about uses. Whilst in most of the islands, there's the issue of scale as well, in that you have small populations and the ability to develop viable businesses um, surrounding sargassum can be a bit challenging. But we do have some success stories that we've been learning from in the region. We've had opportunities to hear in the wider project under the Action Learning Group from people such as the entrepreneurs responsible for the creation of biostimulants, so Red Diamond in Barbados, as well as Mr. Dujon in Grenada, it's not Grenada, St. Lucia, who produces Algas Organics, which is a biostimulant for crops. That has had a lot of success. So that's one area where there's opportunity to use sargassum. Um, Another opportunity that's being explored actively in the region is the creation of biofuels. In Barbados, they're looking at the rum and sargassum project. And there's really a need for us to explore what is possible in small islands where there's this issue of scale, to be able to see the economic benefits, the opportunities that sargassum provide. So even if we're removing it from the beach, what can we do with it?
I know you talked about some workshops that are coming up in Montserrat. Have you either of you organized any kind of workshops on other islands? I know that you're also in the BVI sometimes, and have you had any success with any kind of workshops like this elsewhere?
Yes, so during the first year and a half of the project, we actually faced the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, which came with restrictions um, concerning face to face gatherings. So last September, when we did the drone boot camps in each of the territories, that was the first time that we were able to bring together representatives from different coastal and marine resorts user groups for training. Also, in January of this year, we did a virtual workshop where we presented the findings of the scoping studies and the CAP survey. But in May, what we will be doing is having training of trainers workshops for coastal resource users and managers on best practices for sargassum management. We'll be talking about best practices for removal, best practices in terms of using sargassum, and just a small amount of discussion about how they rehabilitate affected areas. So there's very little that we can do on that side of things, but we need to look at the entire cycle. So that's what we'll be discussing in May, and we have workshops planned for each of the participating territories.
Okay. Are locals also trained in drone monitoring? Is that a possibility? And if that is happening, how is it going?
Yeah, so teams of 7 people were trained in each of the territories. So 7 people trained in Montserrat, 7 in BVI, 7 in Anguilla, and these drone teams comprise a wide cross section of stakeholders. So you had people from civil society, from government. I'm not sure if there were any from the private sector. Um, I guess from the private sector as well in some of the territories. And they are supposed to continue working together and training others in their organizations to implement these drone monitoring protocols. So whilst we worked with 7 people initially, as the program continues to be rolled out, we expect this to be the information to be shared, and that for a larger cohort of people to get involved in this work. In terms of how it's resulting, what it's doing, as I think Lavern just highlighted, is that it's making us aware of what data do we really need, what data is useful for people, who is it useful for, how it can help us to make better decisions. So, for instance, she mentioned this beach where there's actually no access to be able to remove it if you wanted to. So, what are the alternatives? What is a better approach? Do we have the capacity? What further training is needed? What additional resources are required? So, by doing this data collection, we are actually asking a lot more questions. It helps us to ask better questions that we could then find the answers to. So as you can see, it's a circular process where we learn, we ask questions, we modify, and constantly trying to improve our approach to management because we really don't know a lot of the answers right now.
What
We
happened?
interviewed Dr. Henry in Barbados, who's working on that biofuel project a couple years ago. So it's neat to um, just hear all the different solutions and potential products and just economy, kind of products that can be useful on an island with a thing like this. Like just like you were saying, it's like a threat, but also an opportunity. So it's nice to hear that people can be involved in some way or another and try to make something positive about it, even if it's learning and training, from this that wouldn't have come up otherwise. So
Yes. Uh, well, we want to know if you want to add something else about the work you are doing, both, or do you want to share with us something that you want to people know about you, about the work you are doing?
I think that I just want to highlight that because sargassum is something that is new, it's a new phenomenon for us in these islands at least, and we're just learning about how to respond. It's really important to have a highly participatory approach where the resource users, the people who are affected by this phenomenon, have an opportunity to understand it and to get involved in or have a say in how it's managed. And that's something that's really important to us at the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, facilitating participatory management of natural resources and coming up with solutions that are equitable, that are um, that are beneficial to a wide cross section of stakeholders. And so I really look forward to the upcoming workshops where we will get an opportunity to work with people on the ground and to understand what their issues are, what their needs are, and how we can better support them in adapting to this new reality.
Yeah, and I was going to add that I really want to give kudos to Canary because for us, it's like a proactive step as opposed to a reactive one. So being able to have the tools and the equipment that we need to actually monitor before it becomes out of hand, especially here for us in Montserrat, and being able to take, for example, when we did the drone monitoring, we actually captured panorama views. We did 3D maps. We did photo plans and video plans to be able to engage people who would not necessarily be able to visit the beach. So in that opportunity for participatory mapping, they're able to see what's actually taking place, make comments, interact, and I think that's another good step in being able to encourage persons to take ownership for what's happening in your territory. So it's a really good approach. Yeah.
I have a question. When you talk about this, do so people is going to be like trained to use their own drones, or you will lend them drones and they will help you to do these like maps of the whole
No,
Iceland?
Oh,
so a group of us have been already trained. So a cross section of users. So I'm from the GIS department. There's another person from the environment department. We had two private stakeholders. We had the National Trust. We had another person from the fisheries department. So we had different people who were able to contribute to operating the drone. So it's not one person who's always going to be doing the work. So we trained across the board, and that allows us to spread out the work evenly, allowing other persons to become engaged in doing the actual mapping. And then we all fed that back into the software called Drone Deploy, where the images are processed and persons can actually have a good output as to what's on the ground.
Do you use a special drone?
We, well, as part of the project, we're able to acquire the DJI Air 2S. So that's what we use for mapping. Yes.
So it's like a spectral. It has the spectral of sargassum. You can detect the spectral of sargassum.
No, that drone is just for optical, just for what we call red, green, and blue.
Okay.
Just the photogrammetry. It doesn't have multispectral. It doesn't have infrared. It's just the visual part of the spectrum.
Mm.
So just
oh.
taking that image from above and looking down to see where things are.
And are you going
I
to have these images from month to month, each month?
I think that's part of the monitoring plan. So we have to decide how things are being monitored, and it's based on the influx.
Okay.
So based on what we see happening on the ground, then we would determine the need for it. And one of the other reasons I think for us to be monitoring the beaches is to quantify if there is a need for removal, how much would it cost to remove? What's the tonnage? What's the weight? And then using other techniques in GIS to identify suitable sites for disposal or storage, as the case may be.
Yes. And well,
I also wanted to
yes.
note if
Go, Jessa.
oh,
Go
if
on.
you don't mind.
No, no, I don't
Yeah,
mind.
drone use of drones. Yeah, use of drones is only one component to the research and monitoring. We also drones is like the silver standard, but we can also use simpler approaches. Not everybody knows how to use a drone, and in some cases, if you have site level management plans, it may be possible just to use simple site profiles, and these site profiles that we've developed templates for look at the biophysical aspects, the socioeconomic and livelihoods, governance and institutions. So it gives you a snapshot of what the situation is at a particular site and allows you to do a vulnerability and capacity assessment that then helps you to make decisions about whether it makes sense to intervene or not. And then, as Lavern said, you can make decisions later about, okay, how much is it going to cost? What do I need in order to be able to do a cleanup, and how much is it going to cost? And you can use other simple tools like buckets and tape measures. There are other ways to monitor if necessary. Obviously, drones make it a lot simpler, but it's not the only way. And we can even scale up beyond just using the drones to monitor, to fully integrate it into to GIS, and even using artificial intelligence, which they're doing in some places, which would be the absolute gold standard. So it's a spectrum, and we really want to build capacity of those who only need, to understand the most simple approaches, to those who have the capacity to do the more advanced integration. So I just wanted to bring that point across, that the monitoring does not have to require drones, but it does help.
Yes, yes, it's thank you for letting us know, because yes, it's part of the monitoring, as you said, because also when you have these beaching events that come often to the coastline, you need to have the biomass also calculated, how much, to know how much of your coastline is with sargassum, and you can also add the images of drone thing. But yes, it is important not to only leave the drone work alone. You need others also inland, also maybe in parallel doing the field work with the drone, to say,
Mhm.
okay, these are the species that are coming to our coast that might be different to other species that are coming to other coasts. I think you have the same species that all the Caribbean are having. Nathan's 8, Nathan's 1, Fruitan's 3. I think we share the species also. Maybe the amounts and the months that it comes is different, but I think we share the same species because, well, we share the same ocean. Yes.
True.
Jenna, do you want to add something else, or
No, I don't think so. This was so wonderful. Sounds like you guys are doing really exciting work, and I love the adaptive management strategy.
yes? Well, we wish you to have a very good implementation of the project, and that everything you do that you can share with people, because people is going to be very I think they will be open, because as you said also, it's a new episode we have to live with, because sargassum is has come to stay. Well, it was here before of us, so we have to live with it. We have to share the space, the moment, and the time with sargassum influxes. So we thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you again when the projects are in the implementation part, and to have good news about your work.
Thank you. And I
Yeah.
also want to thank you for the work that you've been doing in raising awareness about sargassum and sharing best practices and innovations that we can all learn from. This is really important, and it was a pleasure being here.
Oh,
Thank you as well. It has been a pleasure to be here and to share. I hope others have learned a few techniques in terms of how to manage sargassum in their territories. And like you said, we share the ocean. So whatever impacts me impacts you.
yes,
So thank you for having me.
yes.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank our listeners and our viewers for being with us today. We hope you learned something from our guests because we sure did. And we want to thank Laverne and Yasa for being here. Evelyn, what did you think about their work?
Well, they are working hard. I think that when more people work together as a team, they can accomplish more things. That's I think that's one of the part of them doing. They are not working alone. That's why these kind of projects are going to be very useful for other people, for other stakeholders, are as they say, and sharing the knowledge they have in each field. I think it's like complementing to the implementation of the management projects they are going to do in the future, because right now they are preparing like the scenario. They are preparing the people to know how to manage, how to act when the influxes come. So I think they are preventing something before it happens. So I was very well. I am happy that people can work together in different fields and join the knowledge to accomplish one thing in common.
Yeah, I love the participatory approach and the highlighting on that, because it is really important for people to be involved and that they are being proactive, like you're saying, instead of waiting for something to happen. It's very impressive management plan that they've put together, and it's adaptive because it has to be. Sargassum is unpredictable, and so I think they're doing really great work. And like you said, I hope that other people can see this as an example, and once they can share how successful or, what things might need to be changed out there too, then people can get help, get aid from their pre-planning. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And I hope that you also found funding for your PhD, Jenna. I wish you the best for that.
Thank you.
And if any listener wants to be part of your founding, please
Yeah,
make a comment.
reach out. Yeah.
Yes, make a comment to the Sargassum podcast that you want to found Jenna. It would be nice to know that. Uh, well, we thank you very much for being with us again in another episode, and we hope to see you again and to hear from you soon. And bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in today and learning with us from our guests. If you want more information about what our guests talked about today, please check our show notes for links and information in our archives. And don't forget to like and share our podcast with your friends.
The Sargassum podcast is made possible through funding by the Resilient Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity Program, RESENBID, financed under the 11th European Development Fund (EDF) Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Regional Program. RESENBID is being implemented by Expertise France, with the primary stakeholders being the 12 Caribbean overseas countries and territories. The podcast is produced by Paola Diaz, Mario Garcia Rodriguez, Cleo Maridakis, and Eloise Lopez, and it is hosted by Francisca Elmer, Jenna Contuccio, Florence Menes, Cleo Maridakis, Evelyn Salas, and Paola Diaz. We will be back in 2 weeks with another exciting guest. The music of the podcast is from the song Them I Pray by Drizzle, the Road Runner, an artist from Roatan. Follow him on Spotify or YouTube for more music.